All right, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Hello, as you're coming in. Good to see you. Hey, Ed. Hey, Larry. Hey, Mark. All right, we'll get started in just a moment. It's nice to see everybody. I hope everybody's staying nice and dry in the rain. Hey, Gary, nice to see you. Shabbat Shalom. Since I'm Zooming from home today, I don't have the page numbers in front of me for other Sidurim that is not Lev Shalom, so I hope that's okay. I'll just be calling Lev Shalom today. Hi, Joanna. Nice to see you. Hey, Mark. Hey, Marshall. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Ashrei is on 214 in Lev Shalom. Ashrei Oshrei Veitecha Od Yalalu Chasela Ashrei Am Shekach Lo Ashrei Am Shadonai Elohav Tila LeDavid. Tila Adonai Yadaber Pi Vivarech Kol Basar Shem Kocho L'Olam Va'ed Va'anachnu Nevarech Ya Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Hallelujah. Page 216. ובא לציון גואל, שבי פשע ביעקב נאום אדוני. ואתה קדוש, יושב תהילות ישראל, וקרא זה אל זה, ואמר, קדוש קדוש קדוש, אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ כבודו. ותישאני רוח, ואשמע אחרי, כל רעש גדול, ברוך כבוד, אדוני ממקומו. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. ויבטחו בך יודעי שמך, כי לא עזבת דורשך אדוני, אדוני חפץ למען צדקו, יגדיל תורה ויאדיר. We turn now to the Torah service. We are in Parshat Beshalach, which will also be the topic of our learning today. So I won't give that much in way of an introduction, but it can be found on, this is chapter 13, verse 17. Sorry, chapter 17, verse 13. And we're in Shemot, Exodus. I'll start with the recitation of the prayer for the study of Torah, and then we'll go ahead and begin together. I'll be reading through beginning to end. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Vayhi b'shalach paro et ha'am v'lo nacham Elohim derech eretz pelishtim ki karov hu ki amar Elohim peninechem ha'am birot ha'milchama v'shavu mitzrayma ve'asev Elohim et ha'am derech hamidbar yam suf v'chamushim alu b'nei Yisrael me'eretz Mitzrayim vayikach Moshe et atzmot Yosef imo ki hashpea et b'nei Yisrael lemor Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem v'halitem et atzmotai mizeh itechem vayisu misukot vayachanu ve'etam biktzeh hamidbar v'Adonai holech Lifnehem yomam be'amud anan lanchotam haderech ve'layla be'amud esh leha'ir lahem lalechet yomam v'layla lo yamish amud ha'anan yomam ve'amud ha'esh layla Lifnei ha'am. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Israel, ve'ashuvu ve'achanu lifnei pi hachirot, ben migdol ben hayam. Lifnei Baal Tzafon, nichachot tachanu al hayam, ve'amar paro livnei Yisrael, nevuchim hem ba'aretz, sagar lehem hamidbar, ve'chizakti et lev paro, ve'radaf acharehem, ve'ikaved Daha beparo uvechol chelo veyadeu Mitzrayim ki ani Adonai veyasehu chen vayugad lemelech Mitzrayim ki varach ha'am vayehafech Levav paro vavadav el ha'am vayomeru mazot asinu ki shilachnu et Yisrael me'ovdeinu vayesor et richbo ve'et amo lakachimo vayikach shesh me'ot rechev bachur Vechol rechev Mitzrayim ve'shalishim al kulo vaychazek Adonai et lev paro melech Mitzrayim vayirdof acharei bnei Yisrael uvnei Yisrael yotzeim bayad Rama. We continue on now as we conclude Minha on page 223. I invite us to rise if we're able as we recite our own private Amidah, time for silent meditation and prayer. And hello, Rabbi Dorf. Nice to see you. Hi, Mara. I didn't say hi to you before. Page 223. Oh, say shalom bimromav, say shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru amen. Oh, say shalom bimromav, say shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru amen. If you're still davening, you can continue to pray at your own pace. Otherwise, we conclude Mincha. We turn to page 230. צדקתך צדק לעולם, ותורתך אמת, וצדקתך אלוהים עד מרום, אשר עשית גדולות. אלוהים כמוך, צדקתך כהראל, משפטך תהום רבה, אדם ובהמה תושיע אדוני. Aleinu is on 231, and I invite you to rise if you're able. Aleinu shebech Adon HaKol, latet gdol yotzer Bereshit. Kakatu b'torotecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar v'Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz. Bayom hahu Adonai echad, u'shemo echad. Kaddish Yatom, Mourner's Kaddish, is on page 232. Is anybody in mourning who would like to lead us? Great. Mark, that would be great.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. V'agala v'zman kari v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Yehi shmei rabbah barach le'olam
Amaya.
Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. Yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei t'kudusha brichu.
Brichu.
Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, v'amiran v'alma v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Yehi shalama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Amen.
Aseh shalom v'ramav, hui aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark, for leading us. All right, so we'll move on to the learning component. This is a big parsha for a lot of reasons. I mean, they're all big in their own way, but Bishalach is the big exodus. We have finally Pharaoh sends us off, and we make a break for it, and then we're chased after again, and then we have the climactic moment by Yam Suf, by the Sea of Reeds, and we're between a rock and a hard place where we have the Egyptians pursuing us behind and a big body of water in front. And if anybody ever tells you that you can't find serious humor in the Torah, they're wrong, because one of my favorite moments, Moses looks up to God, I mean, what do we do? And God replies, why are you crying out to me? Go. Which I just think is a wonderful relationship. And I also think says a lot, speaks volumes about faith. So if you were able to print out or access the source sheet beforehand, great. Otherwise, I'll read aloud so nobody's missing it. But I called it Keeping the Faith because it's a great movie, but also I think faith is a really complex and interesting topic. And I think Beshalach has a lot to say about it. So I'm looking forward to presenting some of the commentaries on these verses, and then obviously hearing what you all think about it and your own take on faith. Before I do, there are a couple people I haven't said hi to yet. Marlon, good to see you. And I think I said hi to everybody else. Brant, hi, Brant. All right, that covered. Right, so that's how we begin, right? Exodus 14:15. Then the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites to go forward. And Rashi's comment on this, Rashi says, there is nothing for them to do but to journey on, for the sea will not stand in their way. Their ancestors' merits and their own, and the faith that they placed in me, being God, so that they left Egypt will suffice to divide the sea for them. So the first question, I mean, the obvious midrash about Nachshon, but I wanted to bring something a little bit different. So the Rashi here spoke to me. Does anybody have any reactions to what he's saying? Particularly, has anybody ever encountered something in their lives where they actually felt like the faith they had was enough to get them through it, or that that faith somehow miraculously split the sea, burst through the brick wall in front of them? I'd love to hear if anybody has any experiences with that. Gary, do you have something? Nope, he's gone. And also any counter opinions that, you know what, faith is an important thing, but it's also important to be level-headed and rational and not believe that you can defy the laws of nature or gravity or anything like that.
Well, 2 weeks before I got married, there was there was an article in the Times, the New York Times, listing all of the worries that husbands were having before they got married, and I must say that was very reassuring. Marlon and I have been married 54 years, so it's a long time ago. But that was an important act of faith, I must say, that I got through reading the fact that other people were worried.
That's beautiful, right? So it's also the perfect example of, leap of faith. You hear that a lot with couples getting married and deciding at some point you have enough information, but you're going to embrace the unknown together, and that's all that matters. So I think this is certainly a leap of faith, jumping into the sea and hoping that you get on dry land together and through to the promised land of a successful and happy marriage. That's great.
When you look back at the crossing of the Red Sea, it seems miraculous to us, if you're looking back at it as a historical event. I don't know if it seems so miraculous when you're living through it. I'm just telling you this, even though, because the retelling of a story is different than living through a story. When I was in Wexner with your dad, we had a lot of discussions about miracles. I can't forget the rabbi that was speaking to us, but he said something along the lines of, if you looked at Jews like in the 1940s after World War II in the United States, it was a small insular group. Nobody could have predicted where Jews would be at the time that your dad and I were in the same Wexner class. And he said, if you were living through it, you wouldn't see it as a miracle. He says, but if you look back at it now, no one could have predicted in 1946, 47, where Jews would be in the United States in 2007. And he said, the rabbi said, to me, that's a miracle. Every bit as much as like the parting of the Red Sea. And that's an example of just moving forward. You understand? You just move forward day to day, and over a long period of time, it is miraculous, but it doesn't look necessarily like that when you're living through it day to day. That's what the rabbi told me and your dad at that class.
Well, I think that's really interesting, right? You seem to be bringing in the important point of perspective, right? That when you're living through something, sometimes it's just sort of the natural progression of things, or certainly incrementally, right? It's the whole thing about a frog in a beaker of water, that if you incrementally turn up the heat, it won't know any different, as opposed to if it jumped into boiling water. But I think what you're saying is a little bit different too. And also you seem to be bringing up the idea of everyday miracles, right? If you only think about miracles as being a supernatural splitting of the Red Sea, you miss out on all of the everyday common miracles, which, our tradition impresses on us to appreciate. So yeah, I think those are great points. Hi, Brett. Thanks for joining us. Good to see you. I'll move on here because the next comment is where, for me, the whole conversation shifts. It's from Sforno. And he says, Moses' outcry had nothing to do with being afraid of the pursuing Egyptians. Moses' outcry was one of concern with the people's rebellious attitude, to the point where he was afraid that they would refuse to enter the sea when told. God told Moses that he had no right to assume such a thing, that in fact, he was suspecting innocent people of lack of faith. So what's so interesting to me about this comment is that you might think we're just talking about faith directionally between people and God, but here it now goes more communally. What about our faith in people? And God actually chastising Moses here lightly, but saying, you don't think that the people are going to rise to the occasion, and challenging Moses's leadership here, which I think is really a wonderful move for many reasons. But if you look at the course of Beshalach, you get a ton of the people letting Moses down, right? The people rebel many times in the course of the desert wanderings, and we get a whole handful of them in this parsha alone. So if you're Moses, you have every reason to lack faith in the people, that they're going to not just want to return to Egypt, or that they would jump in the sea and move forward. But here God is saying, how dare you lose faith in the people? So I wanted to bring that to the group, first of all, because I think it complicates the idea of faith, not just between us and God, but us and each other. And we've all lived through times, globally, nationally, personally, where faith in humanity has been challenged, shaken, difficult. So I guess I don't have a question specifically for this, except for if maybe you want to share any reaction, but also a time where maybe your faith in humanity was tried, tested, and maybe validated in a reassuring way. Nobody. We're all a bunch of cynical pessimists. Oh, Marlon, great.
We just lived through it. It was as bad as it could be. And yet we managed to, people stepped forward and did what they needed to do to save people. And it ended. And the inauguration came off.
Mm.
I don't know if we're finished, but at least that day is gone. But we couldn't, while we were living through it, we couldn't know it was going to end. And anybody would do the right thing.
That's beautiful. Oh, did I cut you off? Go ahead. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I absolutely, right? You could look at it, as you look through history, there are throughout history, dark times, light times, and you wonder, how do we oscillate and how does the pendulum swing? But ultimately, it's certainly worth remaining that, holding on to that, upholding faith in humanity that they'll do the right thing in the end. Great. Yeah, Marshall.
If I could just read the fuller translation.
Yeah, please.
The book Achut HaMishulash, and you have sort of a ellipsis there, which I think is what's in the ellipsis is sort of interesting.
Please.
So I'm going to start there where it says Moses' outcry was one of concern with the rebellious attitude of the people, who not only were afraid, something that could be forgiven, but who had dared to be sarcastic in their hour of danger, ridiculing Moses' leadership to the point where he was afraid that they would refuse to enter the sea when told to. God told Moses he had no right to assume such a thing, that in fact he was suspecting innocent people of lack of faith. So it wasn't just a surface thing of, he said, well, the reason they're not jumping in because they have lack of faith. Moses was really concerned that he thought they were ridiculing him, and therefore they would turn the whole tide and they would prevent entering the sea in totality.
Thank you also for giving me an example of how my faith in humanity is vindicated, because I could have sworn without a doubt that Marshall would pull out the Sforno and fill in the ellipses. So thanks for validating my faith in that. But yeah, absolutely right. This isn't coming out of nowhere. Moses has every reason to believe this. But I think that's what makes it all the more nuanced and complicated, that we can all point to a million examples where our faith in humanity is shaken, and that's probably this week alone, and yet God's saying, hey, no, you as the leader of this people, you cannot lose your faith in them, which makes me think God hasn't, which is also nice. So moving on, this is Shemot 17:11. At this point, we are at war with Amalek, right? And we're about to get to that interesting incidence where Moses, as long as Moses raises his hands, the children of Israel prevail against Amalek in the war. And whenever he lets down his hands, Amalek prevails. So the verse goes, then whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, but whenever he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed, right? And Amalek being this perennial villain of the Israelites here, literally, right? The tribe, the group that attacked us midrashically, right? As we were crossing the sea. But here, literally, in this war. So Rashbam comments, It is a psychological axiom that when the warriors see their flag being held aloft, they are inspired with additional courage. When they cannot see their flag being held aloft, they interpret this negatively and are liable to flee from the battlefield. Right. So, I mean, there's an interesting thing going on here with the hand raised. It seems miraculous. It seems odd. It seems a bit strange. So I think what Rashbam's doing here is sort of actually taking a scientific approach to this and and saying, oh, it's motivation psychologically. When you see your leader up there, metaphorically or literally waving your flag, it emboldens you, and you know, it's like a good pep talk from your coach at halftime, or however you want to look at it. But it seems like that's how he's understanding it, which also ties into faith, right? What the impact that your faith has to actually influence the outcome, right? If we sort of wring our hands and say it's over, maybe that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But if you, even though it's difficult, if you can maintain that faith, it actually could influence the outcome. Any comments, reactions to that?
Guadalcanal,
Yeah.
Mount Suribachi, the raising of the American flag. That's what it makes me think of, actually.
Great. Right. Absolutely. Another great historical war example, and a literal raising of the flag that goes down in history, that famous photo, which speaks volumes, right? That picture is certainly worth 1,000 words, but one of them might be this faith. And also it's sort of to tie in, I think, with what Marlon was saying too, the idea of the flag too, and all the faith you pour into your country and what it can be. There's a lot of idealism, I think, in that moment. Great. So let's move on. This is the last comment I wanted to bring, and then I'll open it up for more discussion. This is from Chizkuni, and he's commenting on this incident as well, with Moses struggling to keep his hands raised. And Moses' hands became heavy. This is what he's commenting on. It was tiresome for Moses to have to stand all day long. Aharon and Hur provided a stone for Moses to sit on, and they supported his arms from either side so that he could keep holding his staff aloft. All of this was necessary in order that the people would not become demoralized, right? We sort of talked about that. The expression emunah, which means faith, but I'll return to that in a second, describes anything that does not weaken or decrease in size when remaining in the same position for a long time, such as from morning to evening. Eventually, both of his hands had become too heavy for him to keep aloft without someone supporting them. In the Midrash, we find the following interpretation. Moses called on the combined merits of all three forefathers to reinforce his prayer. So it's a long comment. There's a lot there. But particularly, Chizkuni is picking up on the word emunah, which you can see in the biblical verse, right? Let me scan for it. But at the very end, umizeh echad, okay, vayhi yadav emunah ad boa shemesh. So it's actually referring to Moses's hands being emunah, being this like firm, undecreasing, undiminishing stance, which I think is a beautiful way to look at faith, right? To visualize it as this firmness and stance, but it's also realistic, right? This isn't just Moses having no trouble raising his hands and Israel prevailing. There are times that weaken him. There are times where his hands threaten to fall, and he needs Aaron and Hur and the rock he sits on to support him. So I wanted to pose that and see people's reactions. Is that a helpful image for faith and what it means to you? And what does it mean to need support in your faith? I think it sort of ends on a beautiful note there, that we all need other people. We need other sources of support to keep our hands up when they threaten to fall. And I also think the rock image is interesting because Chizkuni and then earlier, I think it's Rashi at the very beginning, both invoke the merit of the forefathers and foremothers. So here too, it's saying, right in the beginning, Rashi says the sea will part because of your own faithfulness in leaving Egypt, but also because of the merit of your forefathers, right? God and foremothers. God will remember how much God loved our ancestors and will benefit from that zchut, from that merit. And then here again, Chizkuni is also saying Moses invoked our ancestors for support in this moment when he needed faith. So there's a lot to comment on there. And yes, Mara, please.
So what it makes me think of is clearly the interdependence of one another, and clearly within Judaism in the sense of community and the need for support and interdependence. So that's what that speaks to me, and it makes me think of one of the lines from Biden's inaugural speech where he said, sometimes we lend a hand and sometimes we need a hand. And so to me, that's what this is also saying, literally and figuratively in terms of the hand. So.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And you sort of first mentioned community, and then also in referencing the inauguration as sort of the larger community nationally. But right, like within our own Beth Am community, I mean, how many, I mean, in my own head, I can think of many, many examples of times where I've leaned on this community to help me through this pandemic and otherwise other issues. And how many times I can only hope, if in any measure at all, I've been able to lend a hand, like you're saying, and help facilitate that community as well. And then nationally, and that his line in the inauguration speech too, absolutely right. To understand our role in both ways, that we're there to give a hand, and also there's no shame in asking for help. Any more thoughts?
I say, isn't it nice that Judaism's not based on the single person of faith?
Mm.
In other words, man is not an island. You can say this in a lot of ways, but essentially we don't have a lonely person of faith sort of like tradition, which is interesting politically, because there have been presidents that thought only them can save us, only he can save us, kind of thing. It's not a concept that's really prevalent in Judaism, that one person can do everything. So even Moses himself has to have these people supporting him, and he has to invoke his forefathers in order to keep his arms up so that the Israelis can, the people can prevail in a battle, which is a good lesson, because there's no one of us that can do everything. It's just impossible. And it's arrogant to think you're that one. So,
Absolutely. Even Moses, right? Who we put on this rock or this pedestal, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a very important reminder.
And Brent, to that, amen, amen, amen from Emunah, right?
Oh, wow, there you go. That's right. And just because Rabbi Dorff spoke up, I also want to say that in his class, one of the things he teaches, this is on liturgy, he says, notice how every prayer is not singular, it's plural. When you pray for and with community. And that's enshrined in our liturgy as well. So yeah, with that, amen, amen, amen. I hope everybody can take some inspiration about faith as we endure these difficult times, and lend a hand and give a hand, and have no shame in relying on each other to get through what we're going through. So with that, we turn now to Mariv. Again, I only have Lev Shalem with me, so apologies for not giving all the page numbers, but it's on 264 if you're in Lev Shalem. Behurachum yechaper avona lo yashchit v'yibala shiva povla lo yair kol chamato Adonai Hoshia hamelach yanenu v'yom korenu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro mariv haradim. Uma'avir yom u'me'ivi laila, uma'avdil ben yom u'ben laila, Adonai tzavot shemaho. El chai v'kayam tamidim loch alein le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv haravim. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael. V'avtacha al tasir mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. V'haya. Vayomer Adonai Moshe lemor. Adonai Elohechem emet. Umalchuto b'ratzon kiblu alehem, Moshe Miriam u'bnei Yisrael lecha anu shira b'simcha rabba v'amru kulam. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norati lot o seifele. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, v'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, u'ge'alo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, ga'al Yisrael. Hashkiveinu Adonai Eloheinu shalom. Ushmor tzeitenu uvainu l'chaim l'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Baruch atah Adonai, shomer amo Yisrael la'ad. Page 268. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen. כי המלכות שלך היא ולא מעט תמלוך בכבוד, כי אין לנו מלך אלא אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני המלך בכבודו תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ועל כל מעשיו. We turn now to page 270. I invite you to rise as we say our own private Amidah. Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imeru amen. Ose shalom bimromav, uyase shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru Amen. If you're still praying, I invite you to continue at your own pace. Otherwise, we're on page 279 at the second half, the bottom. V'noam Adonai Eloheinu aleinu u'ma'aseh yadenu konena aleinu u'ma'aseh yadenu konenehu. Yoshev b'seter elyon b'tzel shaddai yitlonan. Yikra'eni ve'enehu, imo anochi v'tzara, achaltzehu ve'achabdehu, orech yamim asbiehu ve'arehu bishuatihi, orech yamim asbiehu ve'arehu bishuatihi. We turn to 2:16 for Atah Kadosh. Ve'atah Kadosh Yoshev Tilot Yisrael v'kara ze el ze ve'amar Kadosh 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 Adonai Tzvaot Melech ha'aretz kevodo. V'tisaeni ruach ve'eshma acharai kol ra'ash gadol Baruch kavod Adonai mimkomo. Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. Yivtechu v'cha yodei shamecha ki lazata dorshecha Adonai Adonai chafetz laman tzidko yagdil Torah ve'adir. We turn now to page 281 for the Aleinu, and I invite you to rise if you're able. Aleinu shabech ladon hakol latet gedula leotzer breshit shalo asanu kugoye haratzot velo samanu k'mishpachot hadama shalo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kakatu b'toratecha, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz. Vayom hahu yihyeh Adonai echad. Ushemo echad. Mark, would you like to lead us again in Kaddish Tov?
Sure. Yep.
Thank you. 282.
Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemei Rabbah.
Amen.
V'yalmad divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael. V'agalah v'zman kariv v'yimru Amen.
Amen. Yehi Shmei
Rabbah
Rava
Mevarach
Mivorach
Olam Lalmei Lamaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shemei d'Kudusha B'richu.
Brichu.
Le'elah min kol berchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. V'amiran b'alma v'yimru Amen.
Amen.
Yehi shalom araba min Shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'merma. V'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Mark, and thank you everybody for being here. We're going to start Havdalah now, which is on page 283 in Lev Shalem. If you are able to grab your Havdalah supplies, feel free now, and we'll begin in just a couple seconds. Na 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 hey na 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 hey na na hey na 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 ya da 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 hey da 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 hey da ya da da hey da da hey da ya da da hey da da hey da ya da 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 hey da. Hine el Yeshuati eftach velo efchad ki ozi vezimrad yad Adonai vayehi li Yeshua ushaftamayim besason mimane ha-Yeshua l'Adonai ha-Yeshua alamcha virchatecha sela Adonai tzvaot imanu miskav lanu Elohei Yaakov sela Adonai tzvaot Ashrei Adam boteach bach Adonai Hoshia Hamelech Yaneinu V'yom Koreinu La Yehudim Hai Torah V'simcha v'sason v'ikar ken tihiyeh lanu Kos Yeshuot esa U'v'shem Adonai ekra Ya na 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 Ya na 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei b'samim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei ha'esh. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael la'amim ben yom hashvi'i l'sheshet yemei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol. Shavua Tov, everybody. Good, peaceful week. Thank you for being here.
Tov. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Shavua Tov, everyone.
Ruto, thank you.
Shavua Tov.
everybody.
Shavua
Nice
Tov.
Rosh.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Yosh.